Yes, so I want to introduce Deborah Magid. She spent 20 years at IBM, currently in IBM's high growth software and hardware business. We'll talk a lot about ecosystems and how IBM partners with venture capital. So I'll have Deborah come up, show a couple slides, then I'll be back to sit down. So
thank you.
There you go.
Thanks a million. Yeah, so I have a fun job. I get to travel around pre-pandemic and talk to venture capitalists and their portfolio companies in ways that show you how we can work together and enhance each other's businesses. So I wanted to talk about how technology, as it's presented by venture capitalists and startups and corporations like IBM, but also other ones, will help solve some of the problems we've been talking about. So it is getting serious. The SEC proposals were mentioned several times. It's extremely timely because it happened last Monday and it's only Tuesday the following week. And it's been all over the news. Now, because of the communities I work with, I take a slightly different lens. How many people remember the number of startups that were spawned when HIPAA hit the streets? How many remember the number of companies that were spawned when GDPR was signed? You know, all these synthetic data companies in Europe and in the US, there's a huge opportunity for investors and for startups when there's new regulation. There are existing companies that deal with this, and there's going to be a ton of new ones. The other thing that I've been excited about is the alliances and consortia that have spun up. These in finance and insurance and so forth have all been spun up in the last year. Around COP26, but also previous to that. And one of the things that Scott said earlier today, he was asked, is there a single organization or group of individuals that are in the middle of this and really pushing things forward? I don't think of it quite like that. I think of the people who are conveners. So the United Nations was a convener of these organizations. Universities do this too. MIT, the previous year in 2020, in January, started the MIT Climate and Sustainability Consortium. And one of the things I like about that one is that the kinds of companies in it are not all from one industry. Pepsi is in it, IBM, Accenture, Cargill, Verizon. And I think that if we work across industries, we can find solutions that we hadn't thought of before. I was really hit by Suzanne this morning when she was talking about what it was like to be living on Navajo land. Well, Orange, the French telecom, works in Africa to bring networks to small farms that have no access to internet. Why can't the same principles be applied to people in communities where there's no access? So you could see how corporations can work across each other to make interesting things happen. Now, we bought a company earlier in the year. You might have heard about it. This was in January. It's not a brand new company like Persephone, but it was one we were working with. And I have to say, quite frankly, we didn't know that the SEC was going to make those proposals, but we kind of assumed that they would, as many people in this room did. And so we bought Invisi because we thought it was very important to help ourselves and our clients to be able to look at climate risk, look at climate management, look at the various kinds of ESG reporting, energy management reporting, and so forth in all of these different sectors and all of these different ways of thinking about climate and ESG. Also, you know, the social aspects of it, building optimization. We've been working with building management for like 20 years. You know, we had an Energy Star rating probably 20 years ago. So these are journeys, but the amount of reporting and transparency and carbon capture and so forth that a company like IBM is doing has really accelerated, and that's true across the industry. And so we support all the major reporting frameworks, the major guidelines, the things that you see in the industry. So these are true ecosystems. This is like a consortium, although it isn't a consortium per se, but the number of players and the number of partners is really important. The last thing I want to mention is that this was a blowout year for climate tech venture investing. This chart is from Climate Tech VC. All of this is public information, by the way. I'm going to make these charts available if anybody would like a copy. And the amount of investing has just skyrocketed. Now, this is true in every category of venture investing last year. There were hundreds of billions of dollars spent. And I'm going to stop and let Josh ask a couple of questions, but I want to show you something. These are the top sectors. So energy, built environment, agriculture, forestry, et cetera, and I want to show you just the directionality of the amount of investing. This is clean energy generation, grid tech, land use, on and on and on. The trajectory has been massive growth and fast. And so I want to leave you with that and have a little chat.
Great, thanks. Deborah, one of the things that came up and as we were talking about climate and obviously extreme weather was IBM's acquisition of the weather company.
Yeah.
And Invisi falls into the AI group. We all know that AI needs a lot of data, training data. Talk a little about sort of when IBM acquired the weather company, how that has impacted sort of the organization, and why was that a logical acquisition when probably most people sat there going, why is IBM buying?
I know, I have an app on my phone, but that wasn't the reason we bought it. We bought the weather company for two reasons, really. One was all that data, and the other was they actually had a really good platform for analyzing the data. I don't know if a lot of people knew that, but they had a really nice platform to continue to analyze data and bring more and more data into it. And the use cases were amazing. It's logistics, it's trucking, it's traffic, it's aeronautics. So, it's data that's applied to many, many different industries. They're all industries we're in. Right.
So, so obviously, again, IBM through corporate venture is acquiring, is partnering. Mm-hmm. Part of your job, obviously, is working with venture capital to understand who are the startups, right, that you should be investing in, acquiring. What does that relationship look like, with the venture community? We have a lot of people from the venture community here. How do they engage with IBM? What's that at least that starting point? Because obviously they'd love access to a potential acquirer or more capital.
And please,
and startups alike, right? Startups, I'm sure, again, are looking at IBM and looking at some of these charts and saying, well, how do we work with a big company like IBM? How does your role in working with the venture community and startups, has that been something that's new? Has that been something that's developed over the past decade?
It's not new at all. It's about 20 years old. I didn't start right at the beginning. The group started in, I think, 2000. And the intent at the time was not to invest in startups. The intent was to build relationships with investors so that we could each learn something from each other and then look at business opportunities with their portfolio companies. I sourced probably half a dozen of the acquisitions that we've made over the years. Companies that you'll ask me what stage we can get interested in. I met companies that were 3 guys and still in stealth and hadn't shipped a product yet, and we bought them 4 years later. It doesn't necessarily happen immediately, but it's good to get a lens of what's happening early, and this whole industry is very nascent, truly. We spent a lot of time talking to climate investors particularly. So I had our consultants and our product people meet with some VCs on Zoom, of course, or WebEx, but meet with some VCs last summer. And one of the things that I thought was really instructive is one of my friends, VC friends in London, said when he started his fund 10 years ago, he was educating the market. He couldn't get a lot done, but he was an evangelist and he totally believed in it. And now, over the last 2 years, people are banging on his door. Right. Back to my point about the trajectory. So.
And the returns are really good, right? It's sort of
They are now. You remember the clean tech boom? That didn't work very well for a lot of people. That's why we don't call it clean tech anymore.
So when you think about that prioritization, right? Climate, tech and climate is really important to IBM. You've been there for 20 years. You've seen these trends. How long has climate, been sort of at the forefront and a big focus for you?
For me, it's been a few years because I was looking at outer space, I was looking at agriculture, I was looking at transportation, supply chain. I was looking at things that use technology to do something new and advance in industry, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data, and so forth. And so, there's a lens for climate over all these things. We didn't always talk about it in those terms. I've been working with our energy and utility and electricity consultancy helped sponsor this conference. And I've been working with that team for many years.
Right. And you know, you've used the word ecosystem a couple times. We've used, you know, ecosystem collaboration. When I was up here earlier with Scott from Deloitte, we were talking about, you know, systems thinking and how people have to work together. You know, how do you see your role in that orchestration and trying to bring some of those together, being that you do sit in all of those industries, right, through GBS on the consulting side, through the product side? You know, does IBM have a responsibility also to help bring those groups together?
Yeah, we do, and we should do more than we do. But for example, when I said I brought, you know, some of our people in to visit with investors who I knew who were investing in climate, they were from all across the business. They were from headquarters strategy. They were from the product group that does asset management and logistics and is buildings, and the group that bought Invisi, and the people in the consultancy. We have a new consultancy called IBM Sustainability Services, which is separate from the energy vertical, but related to it. And so all these people get together to discuss these things. And I think we're doing a better job now of bringing people together and having, I invited all of those people to watch this on
yeah,
video.
That's great.
Yeah.
And if we have time for a question, if there's anyone that would like to ask a question. But, you know, so again, you know, you're based here, California, obviously. You know, IBM has offices everywhere.
Yes.
How active are you in Silicon Valley as an organization, not just yourself? And you know, how important is it to bring these types of conversations both here as well as, you know, globally? Yeah,
so we have like something like, I don't know what the exact number is, 250,000 employees now that we've divested Kyndryl. And we operate in every single country in which it is legal for a New York-based entity to do so. So like 190 countries. I can name, you know, the 6 we can't do business with, or the one we just left, because we did, thank you.
Yeah.
And, right? I know. So we like to do things that are hyper-local, as was discussed earlier, because we have these people in these places and they care about what's going on there. But we also like to have the things, you know, that are driven from our strategy and that are driven from our consultancy and the product groups. So being in Silicon Valley is really important because, you know, most of the venture capital by volume and deals and dollars is here.
Right.
You know, it's just a fact. They're big hubs of innovation in other places that are very important. And so what we've done is we scattered the IBM Ventures team in Tel Aviv, in London, in New York, and Boston, and so forth, so that you can build community in local places. And then I cover Silicon Valley, but I also, you know, tag team in these other places. So that what that means is, you know, I can meet with Emerald Ventures in Zurich, or I can meet with ETF in London, or I can meet with Prelude out here. I'm sure you guys, you know, who are the climate investors know all these firms.
Right.
And so, you know, it's good to, and the other thing I'll say about venture is there are a lot of existing funds that are building climate funds as part of their business. So Union Square Ventures, I've known Albert Wenger for a long time. He's a tech investor. He's doing climate now. Speed Invest, the Austrian firm that invests in seed projects all across Europe, is building a climate fund.
And again, I think we talked about.
So people who have traditionally a very broad focus are starting to narrow in because it's so important and they care about it.
And I think we've heard the theme throughout the day that it still is, no matter if you want to call it conscious capitalism, it's capitalism. We're here to generate shareholder value.
Do well by doing good.
But do well by doing good. I think the number for the SDGs originally was that it's a $3 trillion business opportunity, right? So, you know, these are, you know, good investments.
Yes.
So, you know, again, as you think about the next stage of, you know, IBM and venture and investing, what excites you sort of, you know, on this climate journey? What do you see as sort of this next phase?
I really get excited. Somebody was asking what the other panel is each excited about. I get excited about data. I think Orbital Insight, taking data from other satellite companies, they're just a software company. They analyze data from Planet or from drones or from aircraft, and then have amazing use cases where they're doing Earth observation. You know, Prevedier is a really interesting company that looks at macroeconomic data and climate data and all kinds of data. It's not the, oh, can you capture your customer? No, this is big business decisions about risk. So, you know, Invisi is a data company, data analytics company. And Aclemi is so exciting. And I love data visualization. I used to be a psychologist, and I was taught about how to present information. So that's why I showed you charts. So, so I think that's what excites me. The data will get used in ways that change things.
Right. Great. Well, Deborah, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for
you.
IBM's support.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.